How's it? Otherwise, you well. I am here with you and another person that is sitting next to me. This is somebody that I have been discussing Otherwise You Well with since the inception of this idea 5 years ago. And both of our projects and businesses have changed and developed. And we've come full circle and we're having the same conversation, but with you. This is Allan Sweidan. He is a phenomenal human being who does so much in the mental health space. We're going to unpack everything that he's done and created and the impact that he's had on the South African mental health offering, I think is the right word, ladies and gentlemen, and however else you identify. Please welcome Allan Sweidan. Hi.
Hi, Nina. Very nice to see you again.
Nice to see
It's
you
been
too.
too long.
It has. I bump into you at the gym every now and again, though.
Do you?
Yeah, or I don't know if maybe...
around the gym.
Around the gym,
Yeah.
around the, not necessarily exercising, but...
No, in the precinct.
Okay, I don't know where we'd like to start. I particularly want to discuss October Health with
Sure,
you.
great.
Which is the app, and then we can, talk about your history. Okay, so what qualifies you to be talking about mental health? Do you want to just give us a little bit of a history of, your education, I think?
Sure. I'm a clinical psychologist. I qualified in 1997, which kind of gives my age away a bit. And despite all the other things that I've done, I still keep a small practice, which I really thoroughly enjoy. In many ways, it's still my first love, although I've really enjoyed the business journey as well that I've been on. And I think probably the thing that I have done, like maybe made the most contribution, was to co-found, and then really kind of grow the Akeso group of hospitals, which started off with one hospital in 2007 at Crescent Clinic. And we had a small unit there, and that grew as we kind of really understood what people needed, what the psychiatrist needed, what patients needed, how to kind of create a really integrated model. And that grew from one hospital to 13. And we were treating about 22,000 patients a year.
Incredible.
Then Netcare came along and they acquired it. And I worked for them for a while. And then left. So overall, we treated probably around about 250,000 people in the time that I was at Akeso. So that was I learned a lot, and I think that we were able to introduce and grow a really interesting integrated model of treating psychiatric patients in South Africa.
I remember a statistic that you told me so poignantly, and I refer to it all the time, about the amount of psychiatrists that we have in South Africa that are in private practice, those that are in government practice, and how few. I think the word you used was so great, that you created beds so that people could be assessed, because to get an appointment with a psychiatrist was so very difficult. I think you said something along the lines like there were only 600 qualified and practicing psychiatrists in the country. Was that correct?
Yeah, I think it's less. I think it's about 450 for the whole country, and I think about half of those are working in private and half of those are working in public. The bed thing is interesting because the way that the medical schemes have engineered their benefits is that a lot of people just don't have the benefit to see a psychiatrist as an outpatient. And so what happens is they get more and more ill and their risk profile grows until eventually they need to be hospitalized. And there just wasn't enough beds. There weren't enough beds in South Africa at the time to accommodate all those patients. And so what was happening is that they were being placed in general wards in general hospitals, and that was just impossible for the hospitals to manage, impossible for the nurses to manage, and they ended up not getting the best care. So it's kind of like a very ecosystemic thing that happens in this country in particular, that when people need to see a psychiatrist, often the first time they get to see a psychiatrist is after they've been hospitalized.
I mean, so this is what I'm trying to do. So I'm not a therapist, I'm a comedian. I'm somebody that has been on a long journey of my own mental health discovery over the last, probably started struggling when I was about 15. So I'm 42 now. whatever the maths is on that, I think 27
Yeah.
years that I've been on a very long route trying to get diagnosed, trying to find the best way for me to just function in society without suffering. And I think the biggest issue that I had a lot of people find is they don't know where to go, who to speak to. There's a lot of stigma around mental health. The families or their society or their jobs or their bosses or friends, they don't even know where to start having the conversation. So what Otherwise You Well for me is a place to start the conversation. Okay, so here you're on this YouTube channel. This is a conversation with a mental health professional. There are also conversations where I do my silly personality tests with celebrities and friends of mine so that people can start looking at what a conversation of self-awareness can look like. So for me, my metric of whether I'm well or not has to start in my place of self-awareness. But I find that that's not everybody's priority. So how are you able to judge whether you're well if you don't know who you are? So how do you know how you are if you don't know who you are? So that's kind of my sort of gap. So I'm trying to fill this destigmatization gap between the average person who maybe wants therapy, who doesn't think they need therapy, but they're showing some sort of pathological sign and impacting the people around them and their communities, or suffering at work and not performing, or their relationships are impacted or whatever. So where do they start? Now, you've created this app. Before we talk about the app, you had another app before that was more sort of based on targeting individuals. But what I've been discovering with a bunch of friends of mine, because we work in these spaces, we're speakers, we get booked for talks, and they'll have an HR function, and everybody goes, well, I'm definitely not going to talk to HR about my mental health, because then they feel like they've got a target on their back, and they don't want to compromise their work. Is this the space that October Health plays?
You said a lot there.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's great. Let me think. First of all, I think it's great the way you talk about your own mental health and your struggles. I think one of the things that we really set out to do when we set up October Health, which was originally called Panda, was to try and destigmatize mental health. We set it up just after the pandemic, and there was such a lot of talk around mental health at the time. People were much more open to talking about how they had been struggling, because everybody had been struggling. There was fear, there was anxiety, there was loneliness, there was, suddenly we were all faced with this existential stuff that everyone felt like that it was okay to talk about. And as a consequence of that, mental health kind of really came to be something that people were much more open talking about. And but that hasn't completely survived. So it's great. It's very refreshing to hear you talk about it in the way that you do. I think that so what happened with October Health is that we set out. I was very lucky to have met Allan Litz, who had just left Uber, and what Allan had really kind of been able to create with Uber was this market where this technology, I guess, where you can create a market where you have somebody who needs something, and with Uber it was a ride, and then somebody who's providing something, and how do you use tech to kind of bring them together at the right time? And we looked at the idea of mental health and where does a person start their journey? Because as you rightly said, people just do not know how to assess themselves, and they do not know where to start. And it's very ad hoc, because there's no real triage system when it comes to mental health. If you fall in the garden and you're on a trampoline, or your kid's on a trampoline, or whatever it is, and they hurt their ankle, you go down to the local hospital, to the casualty, you'll see a nurse. The nurse will assess you and either send you home with an aspirin or a Panado, whatever it is. If they're worried about it, they'll call a doctor. The doctor will assess you and either send you home, or they'll send you on for an x-ray. After that x-ray, you might need a surgeon, or you might just go home with something like that. But there's a proper triage process. When it comes to mental health, there's just nothing like that, because it's very ad hoc, and there's no real way of assessing where a person is at. And the last thing that I'll talk about to answer this question is that people, when they think about mental health, they think more about diagnoses. And when they think about diagnoses, they think a lot about, like, am I depressed? Am I anxious? Am I bipolar? Do I have an eating disorder? All of those things, which are useful to an extent. But the way that I came to start thinking about mental health is with three major domains, which is your risk profile, your functionality profile, and your distress profile. And the way that we started to think about treatment and interventions and triage was all about those three kind of strata, if you want to say it like that. So a person that is at high risk, who's suicidal or thinking about self-harm or thinking about hurting other people or doing damage, is somebody that you need to treat straight away. A person who is very low functioning, can't get out of bed, just not able to take care of themselves, needs to get help straight away. And a person who's in very high levels of distress, that's going to lead to either a reduction in functioning or an increase in risk. And so you need to intervene there. And if you can measure those three things, then you really have an understanding of where a person can start. So with October, which was, like I say, originally Panda, we set out to create an app that you could quite easily and anonymously, if you wanted to, be anonymous, assess where you were at, and then find the help that you need at the right level. So we created this process of triaging and then creating a whole series of interventions from community all the way through to actually being able to find a professional through the app, depending on how you assess yourself and what you found out.
That is so incredibly helpful. You see, because I'm not a mental health professional, I only have my own experience. And I have to sort of pull myself back from wanting to diagnose people because I've read so much about this, and because I've, when I got diagnosed with ADHD, which was finally such a relief because I'd struggled for so many years trying to figure out how to treat myself. I'm finally stable and have been for the last, I think for the last 2 years, truly stable, but only in the last sort of 6 months in my 42 years of life have we found the correct medication. For the first time, I'm not having insane episodes. And it's just a relief. It's just a relief. I think because I present, like I know what I'm doing in society, and because I'm quite high functioning, people don't realize the amount of work that I do behind the scenes to get myself to the point where I can function. And I say to people, like, it's a full-time job just being myself. And I think what people don't realize is it's a full-time job being yourself.
Yeah.
And not everybody steps up to the job. And as a result of you not taking responsibility for yourself, you start causing havoc around you, simple things like people just simply can't tell the truth to themselves. Never mind, people will make silly lies like, where are you? Now I'm on Oxford Road. They're not. They're on Jan Smuts. Like if you can't even tell the truth about where you are in a car and what time you're going to get to a meeting, how can you be honest with yourself about where you're at? So I think just good old-fashioned like honesty with yourself and being able to take stock is the most important. I mean, we're saying so many things simultaneously, so I'm also just jumping around a lot. I think what I wanted to mention about the three factors of strata that you mentioned. When people like me, for example, before I was diagnosed and correctly medicated, because I'd be so hyperactive and so high functioning and positive and everything like that, and even in that moment truly believe that I'm fine, I would have very severe crashes. So people don't always see that those hyperactivity or over-positive people, that sort of mania, is as much a sign of somebody that's possibly very, very ill and that needs to be addressed immediately or soon. Europe, is it, at what point do you go, I need to notice this? Or is that somebody, will a mental health professional be able to see that? Or, how do you see past high masking individuals?
So, just to touch on a couple of things that you've said. The first thing is that when I first met a doctor in about 2007 or 8 who had come back from the UK to South Africa, and he was the first doctor that spoke to me about adult ADD and adult ADHD. And The truth is, I actually didn't take him that seriously. I'd never heard of such a thing before. And now it's become so prevalent. And I think there are so many adults that are benefiting from drugs like, well, Ritalin and Concerta and Vyvanse and the other generics or whatever, that they suddenly feel like they understand what they've been missing for such a long time. And obviously, it's always been around for kids. And, I see amazing results from kids who go onto it for a period of time, or they need to be on it for longer. It just changes their whole way that they respond to the world and the way the world responds to them. So I think that, ADD and ADHD has been significantly underdiagnosed for many, many years, and I'm glad that that's been rectified. And then just talk about knowing oneself and being able to tell the truth. I mean, I think that's why I love therapy so much, really, is that it's an opportunity in a very safe place to kind of have somebody else help you to understand who it is you are, and to understand sort of like what you're like, what it's like to be on the receiving end of you. That a therapist who can sit with you and actually say, Nina, this is what I hear you talking about, and this is what I hear. And that person holds you accountable in hopefully a very kind and straightforward and direct way, so that you can actually start to kind of integrate some of these things that you're wishing away about yourself. And I think that that's just the beauty of therapy. And I mean, I've had years of therapy. I started, the first time I was in therapy was when I was 20. I'm 55 now, and I've only not been in therapy for probably 3 years of that time since then. And I've had 2 quite long-term analyses where I've been on the couch 3 times a week. So I love it. It's a beautiful space, and I think that not everybody needs it, but people who do need it and who do find it, I think, are mostly very grateful for having had that experience.
What's been the hardest? Do you see like really good results with people that came in kicking and screaming, that did not want therapy? How do I get people the I need to choose my words carefully.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No problem.
I just want to turn off the sound here.
All good.
Because it's buzzing. Sorry, that's
all good.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No.
Kicking and screaming.
There's people with particularly like religious predilections. I found often are the hardest for me to get into therapy, because they feel that all their problems are solved in that space. Because it does provide a sense of community, it does provide guidance, it does provide a lot of like anxiety relief, etc. And we live in a country that is very conservative religiously, in whichever religion it is. But how do I say to someone, listen, you know that there's more. There's something else that you can look towards that doesn't negate that. That's something I've really struggled with. So what would you suggest I say to somebody in that sort of situation?
Okay, so I mean, I think that sort of the rituals around religion and the belief system, can be a very healthy way of being in the world. I mean, I think that's really important for me to kind of say, because I'm not a particularly religious person myself, but I look at some people who kind of embrace that lifestyle and the kind of values that they bring, if they bring godliness into their homes. And I think that those, if it's at all for me to kind of comment on that, I think it can be a very beautiful way of being in the world, and a very kind of healthy way, and it's community driven a lot of the time. So I think that it's really, I think it's important for myself or for other therapists as well, to kind of look at religion as something that is neither good nor bad. But what happens sometimes, I think, with religion is that it can become quite binary, that things are right or wrong, or good or bad, or godly or the devil, or whatever it is. And I think that when that happens, I think when people have a religious kind of an internalization of a religion that is fear-based, and that is preventing them, I think, from leading lives that are fulfilling, because they have to deny large parts of themselves, then I think that's where it becomes quite problematic. And I think that the only thing that you could probably say is that, symptoms are symptoms. Just a bit earlier, you were talking about your own symptoms and, going through quite highs and lows of your moods. So, when I'm thinking of if I was sitting opposite you, I wouldn't say, how you're feeling now. I would say like, we'd say maybe since Easter.
Okay.
Or, how have your moods been since Easter? And then it would be a long enough period of time for us to say, actually, they haven't been great. You've had some good times, but you've had some very low times. And you're here because of the low times, not because of the good times. So let's talk about those things. And if a person can acknowledge that religion can be beautiful, but that it can't be the cure-all for everything, and then maybe they just need to go and talk through something, I think that can be useful, but it's a very hard thing to address. I don't think that there's any right way to approach it.
Yeah, I think that's just been a major difficulty. And when I have spoken to a lot of my friends where I'm like, therapy might help you. And they're like, no, but I go to church on Sundays. And I sometimes feel that it doesn't fill all the gaps. Or I get the other group of friends who are like, no, but I go to gym. So I'm like, well, yes. You've got to go to gym. You've got to go to church or shul or temple or whatever it is. You've also got to eat properly. You've also got to sleep properly. You've also got to not watch murder documentaries at midnight. It's a holistic approach to all of these kinds of things, But I think the main issue is what do pathological presentations look like? So when I say pathological presentations, it's like, when is your behavior look like there could be something that needs to be addressed psychologically? Yeah. So what do those look like if I'm in the office? I'm sitting, and Allan is just inconsistent, or Allan is, what are the markers that I could see that I could maybe say to the Allan, hey, have you maybe thought about getting therapy?
I think there's two ways of looking at it. I think the one would be if somebody's presenting with some kind of symptom. So if we think about like sort of the most common diagnoses, which would be depression and anxiety. So if you're trying to sort of think about somebody who's depressed, then you'd be looking at changes generally in their appetite, their sleeping, their libido, the things that they used to enjoy, and just changes in their general mood. And if you see that happening and it lasts for a period of time, 10 days to sort of 2 weeks, it might be something that you want to speak to somebody about. The other thing is an increase in sort of self-harm or things that they don't look after themselves in that way. So that's one way of looking at it, in terms of looking for symptomology and saying, I've noticed these things and these changes about you, and can I help, or what's going on? But on a more general level, I think that the way I always think about sort of what does it mean to kind of be healthy, it's if you have the capacity to live a life where you're able to find love and to love someone and accept that love in return, to find work meaningful, and then to be able to play and sleep. I think those three aspects of our lives, if we're able to do those in a way that generally gives us some kind of satisfaction or happiness or fulfillment or meaning or whatever you want to say, then I think you're generally on the right track. But if you've got something that you're doing or something that you're feeling that's interfering with any one of those three aspects, then I think that it's probably worthwhile going and saying, I keep meeting people and nothing ever works out, or every job that I go to just doesn't work out in the end. I'm always asked to leave, or whatever it is, or I can't sleep at night, or I just can't switch off. If you have any of those things, then I think that it's probably worthwhile going in and having that checked out and saying, can you help?
Okay, so thank you so much for answering, which are very sort of rudimentary and entry level questions. We've never really discussed any of these very basic things on this show, so I'm glad to have someone of your sort of, you've got a lot of expertise in a lot of things. And what I want to move towards is talking about October Health. And just before, off air, just before Allan joined us, I had said, Panda was an app that was pretty much focused on individuals, and that was a sort of massive need in the world post-COVID. But October Health seems to be more focused on well, for want of a better term, B2B, so business to business. What does that mean?
So we wanted to reach as many people as we possibly could, and we wanted to find a sustainable way of doing that. And ultimately where we arrived at is that if we could kind of sell the concept of overall wellness to companies, then we could reach the most amount of employees that we can. And we've actually been, I'm really, happy to say we've been really successful at being able to do that. And what we do is, we go in with an incredibly engaging app. We just dropped the latest version of our app today, which will be available in a couple of days. And it's an incredibly engaging way of understanding who you are. You're continuously growing, learning, assessing, being coached, engaging with a mental health companion. You can engage with an AI nutritionist. It's a beautiful and engaging app. And what we're doing all the time in the background is we are helping people to kind of understand a bit better who they are, but at the same time on a very anonymized basis. So you never give out any details about who you are when you sign up with the app. We're collecting data in the background, and we're helping companies to understand where their employees might be struggling, so that those companies, and a lot of them seem to really care about their employees, can intervene before a situation arises where there's some kind of issue around, let's say, sexual harassment or bullying or a toxic environment or whatever it is. And in doing so, what we're able to do is we're helping those companies to retain their best talent.
Fantastic.
So it's helping people to kind of be well, their employees, and then it's helping the companies to really thrive because their employees feel cared for. And at the same time, companies can be much more proactive.
I found out in South Korea, some of the bigger, tech companies or, appliance companies would offer mortgages to their staff at much lower interest rates than the banks. But what that does is it ties the employee to their company for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And so, yes, great, you're paying off your mortgage at a lower interest rate, but if you're unhappy in your workplace, there's like a lot of it has increased suicide rates. So when people feel stuck, these are the things that are happening. I mean, they've got a totally different set of societal ills, whereas they've got a more honor-based society. So shame is a big part of why people are doing things like that. Whereas I don't feel that we necessarily have a lot of shame-based or honor-based like behavioral things. I think it's a lot more of like a generalized abandonment, sort of the whole country feeling abandoned by itself, and I think that if companies are bridging the gap of like, okay, you're safe here, we've got this part of you covered, because if you're not feeling safe at work, and that's the safety that you're providing for yourself and your family, etc. And if you're going to do anything to jeopardize that by saying, listen, I'm not well, that's of course you're not going to go to HR and say, I'm not well. But if you're anonymous in that space and you can get help anonymously. So yes, people are coming to you with that information, but then what support do they get in return? So take me through through that.
So there's an enormous amount of support within the app that the HR never needs to know anything about what's going on. But also we've worked quite hard on destigmatization. So when you and I originally met, I wanted you to host some sessions in the forest. I don't know if you remember. And the forest is this beautiful community that we have within the app where we're now running sessions 20 hours a day on all kinds of different topics. So people can go in and they will generally, if not today, they'll find something tomorrow that really speaks to them about where it is that they need to be. So that's the first line of intervention. And then, like I said, we use AI significantly. I think we're pretty advanced in helping, in sort of being able to provide really good AI interventions while providing guardrails at the same time. So that our AI never does therapy, and it's able to pick up on language and to say, I can't go there with you, but what I recommend is that you call this number. And we always have a number to call. And that number you'll be able to get help, whichever that employer organization has chosen. That number is an anonymous number, and they'll be able to get the right kind of help that they need when they phone that number. So it goes all the way from these community-based platforms all the way through to actually being able to speak to a psychologist or a registered counselor or whatever it is, depending on your level of need.
That's phenomenal. I think it's really phenomenal. Can I sign up for it just as an individual? Do I have to work for a company?
You can sign up as an individual, but unfortunately, it's quite, the consumer version of it is quite limited. So
Okay.
it is much better to go through a company if you can. Even if it's a small company, I think you can approach us and we'll try and make a plan.
Okay. I mean, I'm not trying to find fault in your offering at all. I'm just trying to understand what the processes are. So this is actually really phenomenal for people that work in this space, for your HR departments. And October Health, is that because Mental Health Month is in October? Is that where the name came from?
Actually, not. It's actually Mental Health Day is in October. I think
Oh.
Mental Health Month is actually in May.
Interesting.
Originally, but Mental Health Day is traditionally celebrated or acknowledged on the 10th of October. So the 10th, it is the 10th. But also on a personal level, I had a younger brother who passed away, and his birthday was in October, and he had Crohn's disease, and then he had through that he kind of developed an addiction towards pain meds, and eventually, unfortunately, he overdosed about 2003, so coming up for 22 years now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. His birthday was on Halloween, on the 31st of October.
Okay.
So that also was meaningful for me to kind of, to acknowledge that he was definitely a part of the motivation for my own journey in this field.
You're quite a sentimental person, it would seem, from the outside. Before, when it was Panda, it was your experience of what you thought pandas represented as
exactly.
well.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you've got your own personal imprint or footprint in the DNA of all of this, because I think that that's important. It seems that every project that you've done has all been about finding the best way to help as many people as possible. And I think that's really our issue. To get an appointment with a psychologist is difficult. You need to be referred by a doctor. To get an appointment with a psychiatrist, you need to be referred by a psychologist. If you're not on medical aid, you've already gone and stood in a queue for a GP, then you've stood in a queue for a psychologist, then you've been on a waiting list, then you've been on a waiting list to get to a psychiatrist. So by the time you're being treated, it could be 6 months down the line from when you first started presenting symptoms.
Yeah.
So what's so great about this, even if the personal entry level into the app is limited, you're at least going to get to your first port of call. You'll get the basic information. And what I cannot stress enough is just let go of your idea of what you think therapy is. Let go of it. It's just a process of getting to know yourself. And if you're afraid of you, then that's the best place to start, because there's no one else is going to see. It's just a conversation with you and a medical professional who is not the local gossip. They are medically bound to keep your information private. And people are talking to other people in spaces that are unsafe, that are not guided by any sort of like law or lore, in that, there's no oath-based behavior. Yeah, sure, I pinky swear I'm not going to tell anybody.
No.
There's no such thing as that in
No.
in a professional environment,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of therapists go for therapy. I think they should, and so they know what it's like to be on the receiving end of that, and I think that helps them to kind of really honor the space and the privacy. I think that's I think it's really important.
Do you find that since you've been doing this work that a lot more men have been coming forward in seeking help?
Um, that's a great question. So in the psychiatric hospitals, when I was working there, the men would generally come in with more addiction issues, and then you had more ladies coming in with depression and anxiety. What I definitely have found, and on a very anecdotal level, because I haven't done any research, that men are more open to coming in and talking about where they're at. And that's a bit of actually my practice, where I found like a real niche of where I like to work is with men who are, let's say, in their 40s and 50s, who are evaluating their lives. And I think you get to that point, and you're there now, where you kind of think you kind of realize you're just not going to live forever, and that there has to come a time. Well, there doesn't have to, but that maybe there is an opportunity, rather, that to kind of say, this is it, right? So let me see what I'm doing that's getting in my own way of my own happiness and my own meaning, and let me try to work through that stuff. And I just love that journey. I mean, yeah, I do. I find it so meaningful.
I'm so glad to hear that, because I often think, I'll often sit in therapy and go, gosh, I wonder, I mean, I must be like the sixth person this person's seen today. Aren't they tired? I mean, I know I
Yeah.
probably shouldn't be thinking about that while I'm in my own session, but
Yeah. Well,
I'm,
you're a caretaker.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I often kind of go, I hope that I mean, how does a therapist, I'm so glad that therapists go to therapy, is what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah.
so glad that therapists go to therapy, because imagine you having a bad day and then you sort of just take it out on whoever's with you.
Yeah.
I've had friends come to me, because I hold space for a lot of my friends,
Mm.
and I listen and stuff. And then sometimes I think that I've got capacity to listen to someone and I actually don't. And
Mm.
then I snap and,
Mm.
or, I say something that's just flippant.
Mm.
And then I've broken this safe space trust that this friend of mine had with me. And I kind of go,
Mm.
well, actually, I'm not a mental health professional. I'm just a friend. And you're also
Hey,
a
I do
love,
that too.
like,
Don't
is
worry.
it?
Well, not with my
Yeah,
patients.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But your friends.
But yeah, we're all kind of human, and I think that your role is not to be a therapist. I don't think with your friends. I think it's to kind of be human and to be you, and to allow that space to kind of just be there. But as a therapist, like, I mean, I think maybe you can see that I love the process, and I think that it's like what you're doing here, and like there's lots of meaning to it. There's just to talk, to kind of connect with people and to find resonance, and um, I don't know, what else are you going to do with your time?
Yeah. Well, you know what I found a lot, sort of when I was still doing a lot of step work
Mm,
and going to a lot of meetings and in the rooms and things,
mm,
I found that, you know, we're generally all going through something. Something lives in the zeitgeist, whether there's like,
mm,
you can feel it in the air, there's something in the water, there's, generally most people are going through the same thing at the same time,
mm,
because the economic factors everybody
mm,
is experiencing simultaneously, or the
mm,
weather, or
mm.
electricity, or have you noticed that somebody mentioned recently that seems like Joburg's come out of a depression? Everybody that I spoke to, I think we were all very depressed and
Mm,
anxious during load shedding. I
mm.
think that it
Oh
had
yeah.
a massive impact on people's mental health. Have
Mm.
you noticed across the board that people are not as depressed
Mm.
as a function of that? Like, how much do external factors affect like a normal person that isn't prone to depression, is what I'm saying.
I think a lot. I mean, I think especially in Joburg. We're faced with I mean, I love Joburg, and I never want to leave Joburg. But it's a tough place to live when there's load shedding. In my area, I live in Parktown, Old Parktown, where the water pipes are like terrible. Sometimes we have a week without water, and we see people like sort of running. Now, I mean, I know that there are lots of South Africans who are faced with the same sort of things, but Joburg can be a tough place to live, and there's potholes and there's all kinds of stuff. I can tell you the way I deal with it. I don't know. I mean, I might get into trouble for saying this, but I've actually stopped listening to the news. I still read copiously about the news, but I do it in my own time in a way that I can digest things, because I find if I listen to talk radio and I listen to the news, I'm forever being told what it is that I need to be scared about, or what
Right.
I need to worry about.
Right.
And a lot of that stuff doesn't affect me in that day. So what I've just started to avoid the news, because it's not the news. It's just people telling me what it is that I need to be worried about. That helps me to cope living in Joburg. I don't know if that's good advice or not.
I mean, I watch copious amounts of K-dramas,
There you
so
go.
everyone's
Yeah.
got their escape.
Mm.
Alan, I think that this is such a wonderful offering. I hope that there's people that are running businesses that can find this as a great offering. Do you offer this as a, a a live talk, or is it a virtual thing? How do you introduce yourself to an organization?
Um, they can contact us. They go onto our website, which is october.health. There's lots of ways of connecting with us. We'll set up a demo. We'll show you exactly how the employee, excuse me, engages with the app. We'll show you what happens in the background, the kind of data that we're collecting, and how we can be proactive in helping you retain your best talent, and make your workplace thrive. So it's just going to www.october.health.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that can benefit from it, and a lot of the business people that I've had on season 1 that will definitely benefit from this. Thank you so much.
That's
Thanks for
great.
answering such very basic and rudimentary questions about psychology. I know that this is something that you are so very passionate about, and I
Yeah.
wish you all the best with this new venture with October Health.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been great to be on. Yeah. Otherwise, are you well?
Otherwise, you
Anyway,
will.
yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, South Africa and the rest of the world. If you're tuning in, look, we're fine.
We are.
Otherwise, you will.